Attention, all passengers. Special announcement. New destinations have been announced. Please be advised and plan accordingly. All aboard.
All right, can everybody hear me? Just hearing some responses from chat. All right, so hope you guys enjoyed that little video there. And as that video stated, welcome everybody to Flutter Festival by GDSC Sunway University. This is our first of our 2 sessions here. We hope you guys are excited to learn alongside us and learn something new so that to better prepare yourself for the future, and at the end of the day just have fun, network with some of us over here, and get to know a few other people. So if everybody can hear me, I think we can get started. As I mentioned, welcome to Flutter Festival. For our first session today, it is Introduction to Dart. So for those of you who don't know, Dart is sort of the stepping stone of what you need in order to be able to utilize Flutter and use it effectively. You need to learn Dart first, and that's why for our first session for today, we will be introducing you guys to the basic syntax in Dart, as well as how to get you started on Flutter. And I'm very excited to announce our speaker later, Adrian. But before that, there's a few housekeeping things for us to keep track of. All right, basically, as you all know, we are GDSC Sunway University. But what is GDSC? What is Google Developer Student Club? It's a very fancy name. There's the word Google in it. It carries a lot of weight to it. But what are we about? So basically, every GDSC chapter is a university-based community groups for students interested in Google developer technologies. So this is a place, and this is a community. We want to cultivate a place where students grow their knowledge in a peer-to-peer learning environment and build solutions that solve local problems. That's why we are all here today. The speaker in itself is a student at Sunway University. We're trying to learn from each other and trying to build a community to make the world a better place. So, and for those of you who do not know, GDSC Sunway University is also partnered with Sunway Tech Club. So don't be confused. GDSC is not a standalone club registered under Student Life. We are a chapter, or we are a program under Sunway Tech Club. So if you like what we do here at GDSC, you like the Google developer technologies we're teaching you and sharing with you, I am very sure you guys will love what we do here at SDC, where our general scope and range is broader, and you can learn even more stuff than just things like Google developer technologies. Without further ado, let me introduce myself. For those who have been here for a few events already, I'm sure my face is getting old and boring to see, but my name is Benjamin Ui. I'm a GDSC Sunway University core team member, and I'll be your host for today, and make sure everybody has a good time, everybody's pretty comfortable and enjoying today's event. And I'm very, very excited to announce our speaker for today, Adrian Ching, our guest speaker, who will teaching you throughout this this session today about the introductory to darts, and he's here to answer any of your questions you guys have. And on top of being just a computer science student in Sunway University, he's also a full stack software development enthusiast. So he knows what he's talking about, and he's also a former software engineer intern at Cyber Village 𝗙𝗪𝘂𝗏, and he's former software engineer intern at 𝗙𝗪𝘂𝘁𝗶𝘃𝗋𝗋.com. And because he is a Flutter specialist, that's why he's here to teach us all today. And as you can see, even though he's a student, he has loads of experience under his belt, and I'm very sure he's going to give us a wonderful session today. So without further ado, if you want to follow him on LinkedIn, or even better, check out his GitHub for those of you interested in his projects, because he has plenty of amazing projects for you to learn from or contribute to. You can check that out as well. And without further ado, passing the floor to you, Adrian, and let's get started with our first session.
Okay, hello everyone. Can you hear me? And let me just set up my stuff first, yeah? Okay. Is everyone seeing the screen?
Yep, looks perfect.
Okay. Alright, so let's start. Hello everyone, welcome to today's workshop. So first of all, let me start by introducing myself. So my name is Adrian, and I would just like to throw it out there that this is not going to be like a formal session or whatever. So yeah, hopefully this session will be more laid back, chill, and the whole point is to just have fun while programming. So I am a computer science student and I'm in my final semester. So I've used Flutter for cumulatively around a year or so. And my final year project is actually developed using Flutter, and it's a mobile application. And personally, throughout this Flutter journey, I find it really easy to use. And especially if you know the fundamental concepts of programming, then yeah, I think you get the hang of it just fine. But if you are a complete beginner to programming, don't worry. Today, in this workshop, we'll be covering all of the basics from scratch, and yeah, I think everyone will do just fine. Okay, let's start. First of all, Flutter is Google's portable UI toolkit for building beautiful multi-platform applications. Yes, so it supports multiple platforms such as it supports mobile apps, of course. It also supports modern-day browsers. It also supports desktop apps and embedded devices. So fun fact, Toyota announced last year that their infotainment system in the cars, they will be using Flutter to develop it. So I think that's pretty cool. And the best part, all of this is from a single code base. Yes, but I would like to say that Flutter is only a front-end framework. So for back-end processes such as notifications, database, permissions, all those kind of things, yeah, it may vary from platform to platform, but if it's front-end UI elements, then yeah, Flutter will work the same for all of these different platforms. Okay, so now some people may be skeptical about Flutter. They will say something like, Flutter is so new, like the community isn't big enough yet, like how do I find support if I face this problem, whatever. So I think here's an interesting statistic. Over the years, people have had more interest in Flutter than other popular frameworks. And yeah, React Native is in there as well. And this is evident from the number of questions asked about Flutter in this popular programming site called Stack Overflow, which if you have a little bit of programming experience, I'm sure you have came across this site, right? And yeah, although this metric may not seem anything significant, but I think it's still nice to know that Flutter is becoming more popular since its official release. And its official release is around here. So like December 2018. And you can see the interest just skyrocketed, like boom. Okay. Now Flutter is just a framework, right, as I've mentioned earlier. The programming language behind Flutter is Dart, which is also developed by Google. So to use Flutter efficiently, we have to learn Dart. Like there's no shortcut. Otherwise you get lost and you don't know what you're doing, especially if you don't have any programming knowledge at all. So yeah, we have to learn that later on. But yeah, some fun facts about Flutter is that it's built on top of the Dart language. All of its UI elements are widget classes. I'll get into what a class is later on, but just know that a Flutter app is basically an entire widget tree. And yeah, Flutter provides many out-of-the-box widgets, so you can just start using the widgets directly. It's something like the drag and drop technologies like Wix or whatever, but this one provides more flexibility, but you also have to write actual code. And some fun facts about Dart as well. Dart is a strong object-oriented programming language. It also has modern features such as type safety, sound null safety, and asynchronous programming, but there are many other features which I will not mention right now. So as you can see here, people usually assume that if you learn Dart, you are just going to use it in Flutter, that's it. So I think one of the downside about Dart language is that it's not as versatile as other languages such as JavaScript, Python, and all those. For example, for JavaScript, you have a lot of different frameworks, right? Let's say you want to learn React Native, and yeah, if you learn JavaScript, you can use it on React Native, you can use it on Nest.js, Next.js, all of those other frameworks. But for Dart, usually people learn Dart to use Flutter, that's it. And Google knows this. That's why they have the same mascot for Flutter and Dart, and it's called Dash. So Dash is a hummingbird, And you may be wondering like, why dash? Why hummingbird, right? That's because Google thinks that it represents speed because dash and hummingbird, yeah. Which I don't think Google is wrong by any means because Flutter and Dart is kind of fast. Okay, and on the right you can see this big giant Dash plushie just chilling at the corner there in Google's office. Yeah, I think it's pretty cute. To learn more about Dash, you can head on over to this link and read about how Dash started. Okay, so a few benefits about a Flutter app, right? Flutter apps are fast, so you don't need to worry about the performance of the app as much, because most of the time it will run smoothly without jittering or lagging, stuff like that. Also boost the productivity of the developers. As you can see on the right over here, there's this feature called a hot reload, which like you change code and then you can see it being applied instantly. And Flutter apps can also be very beautiful, as evident in the right over here. But I must say that, of course, this depends on the design of the app and how complicated you want it to be. But this is just to show you that it's definitely possible with Flutter. And as I've mentioned earlier, Flutter provides many out-of-the-box widgets which you can immediately start using. And they provide you this widget catalog over here to browse through all of the different widgets and apply them in your app. Okay, so Flutter is only a front-end framework, right? But here's the best part, it can incorporate many other technologies to do backend processing stuff, or like other types of technologies, APIs, all of those things. And it supports a lot of different third-party plugins and libraries. We can also use different IDEs like Android Studio, Xcode, and also Visual Studio Code. And just a disclaimer, today's session we are going to be using Visual Studio Code. So if you are using Android Studio, maybe some things will be a little bit different. So yeah, just a disclaimer. Okay, and a Flutter app can also range from startup apps all the way up to enterprise level applications. And yeah, these are some of the examples in the market, like right now, the Flutter apps in the market right now. And to see more, you can head over to this link. They will show you that you can read each app, like why they chose Flutter and how it began, all of the stories. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Head on over to this link. So I feel like since seeing like all of these different apps being developed in Flutter, it's becoming more and more competitive in the app development market, and hopefully, you know, over the years, I think Flutter will be a really strong competitor. Okay, let's start. But first, I know all of you want to build a Flutter app, right? But first we need to in order to use Flutter easily and correctly, we need to learn the Dart basics. Otherwise, you'll be suffering like me, trying to rely on trial and error while I first started, and that's not a good look. So today we will only be covering what's necessary to learn to start using Flutter. So I'm not going to go through a whole Dart programming like workshop or whatnot. I'm just going to teach the basics of Dart to get you started to start developing a Flutter app. So there are 4 main concepts over here, which I will get into later on. But once you understand these 4 concepts, then you can really start making your own Flutter app. And on a side note, I just want to say that we as developers, we should not be ashamed to Google stuff. Yeah, that's because I see some people being hesitant to Google stuff. They feel like it's cheating and whatnot. But seriously, if you don't Google stuff, then you're just inconveniencing yourself. So why not, right? Okay, so this whole thing may take around an hour or so. But yeah, I feel like it's really useful if you start learning Dart first, then applying it into a real Flutter app. So yeah, okay, let's begin. You guys ready? You got a glass of water, everything prepared? Okay, let me just take a sip of water first. Alright, so the first topic is variables and data types. If you are completely new to programming, don't worry, I'll explain everything from scratch. So variables are uniquely named references that store value. And since it's uniquely named, you cannot create, or in programming terms it's called declare, two variables with the same name in the same scope. Don't worry what a scope is, I'll explain it later on. But once a variable is declared, you can reuse it again and again as many times as you want. And you can even change the value stored in the variable with a different value, but it has to be of the same data type. Don't worry about data types as well for now. So to declare variables in Dart, there are two ways. The first is implicitly typed variables, second is an explicitly typed variable. So the difference between the two ways are the data types as seen here. So for implicitly typed variables, you will assign the value, and Dart will be the one telling you what this variable's data type is based on the value. So you won't need to do as much of the work. Dart will be the one doing the work at the back. But for explicitly typed variables, you will be the one telling Dart what this variable's data type is. Okay, so there are a few variable naming rules that you must follow for this name over here. First, the name of the variable must not have white space in between, such as NA space ME, that's not valid. So it also must start with either a letter or an underscore, meaning you cannot start with numbers or you cannot start with symbols. And it's recommended in Dart to follow the lower camel case naming convention. So a lower camel case naming convention is something like this. As you can see, the first letter is a lowercase, and if there's a space here, usually number space of space cars, right? So the space will be replaced with a capitalized letter to indicate that it's a new word. Okay, now let's start with the implicitly typed variables first, because it's simpler, because Dart will be the one doing the work for you. To declare implicitly typed variables, you just use the var keyword over here. Variable name, the name can be anything you want as long as it follows the simple rules, and a value. Now if you want to follow along, right, if you want to follow along in code, open Visual Studio Code. Why Squidward of all things? To prove that the name can be anything you want as long as it follows the rules. Okay, I'll wait for like 10 seconds for everyone to open Visual Studio Code. Right, so now we are going to create a Dart application. To do that, first make sure to go into your extensions just to double check. You can go View, Extensions, or just click on this thing here, and make sure you install Dart, this extension, make sure it's installed, and make sure Flutter is installed, because we are going to use Flutter later on. Right, give you guys another 10 seconds for those that haven't installed yet. Okay, so what we're going to do right now is to go to View, Command Palette, or you can use the shortcut over here. Click on this and type in Dart, and you should see this. And we're going to create a simple console application. Select which folder you want it to be in. I'm just going to select this folder. And give it a name. The name can be anything you want, but if it's an invalid name, then yeah, it will tell you. Okay, once you created it, then it will automatically generate all of these files. Don't worry about these files for now. And that's it. And you should see something like this. So now you can start running actual Dart code. To do so, go over here, there's this run button, and you can either select start debugging or run without debugging. Usually for me personally, I would just run without debugging. It's just like, yeah, to demo. Okay, and if you want your console to be at the bottom, which I usually prefer, Then just right click, move panel to bottom. There you go. That's it. So now you guys can follow along as I teach. Right, let's just try running it once. Oh wait, we already ran it. But yeah, there you go. Hello world. Now let me just explain what we are looking at first. This is the main function of a Dart or Flutter app. So every Dart or Flutter app has to have this main function over here. I'll cover what a function is later on, but just know that this is a scope. Everything inside of the curly braces here is one scope. So if you declare a variable in this scope, you cannot use it outside of the scope. And yeah, basically when the app is run, everything in the main function will be run as well. So the main function has to be in every app, Flutter app and Dart. Okay, back to the slides. Now let's see what's going on. If we write this in the main function, and this will be the visual representation of what it will look like. So let's see. The characteristics of the variable, the name is Squidward, the type is integer. So Dart knows that it's an integer because of the value given, and the value is 100. And this is the actual code, if you guys want to run it. Okay, and yeah, and this will be the output. Okay. Now let's take a look at another example. Yeah, same thing here. And now we are going to run this code after this line of code. And this will happen. So the old value will be pushed out of Squidward, and the new value will be pushed into Squidward. And as you can see, we don't use the var keyword here, right? That's because the variable already exists. We are not declaring a variable. We are just assigning a new value to this current variable. And this is the actual code. Right, so now we've learned about implicitly typed variables, right? It's pretty easy. Now it's time for explicitly typed variables. This one is a little bit complicated because you need to learn about different data types. But let's see. Instead of the var keyword, we are using the type keyword. But this type keyword isn't an actual keyword. It's just a placeholder to demonstrate. These are the actual data types in Dart. So each data type in every type of data in Dart is a class. Don't worry about what a class is yet, but just know that each class will have its own features and own functionalities. Now these are the primitive classes. If you guys have programming knowledge, you would already know like what are these, but it's okay, let's demonstrate. So I'm going to split the screen here. Right. First data type we're gonna learn about is the integer. And from the previous example, the integer you have seen, right? Something like this. Print it out. And this is an integer which is a whole number. Basically an integer is a whole number. So we can change this var keyword to an integer and it will work. So an integer is a whole number. This is also an integer, negative values. But what about this? Now it shows this red squiggly line, right? Hover over it, it shows that it's a double. So a double is basically an integer with decimals. So to change that, just do this and it works. Now for integers and doubles, these are numbers. So we can perform simple operations on these. Let's see. To assign a new value, I'm going to do this. Now what's happening here? If you run it, you can see it gives 105. So what we are doing here is we are assigning a new value to 𝗙𝗏𝘂𝘁𝗏, which is the current value plus 5. So the current value is 100.052. So 100.052 plus 5, and that's the new value. Then we can also simplify this whole thing by doing this. So this means new value equals to current value plus 5. You can also do new value equals to current value minus 5 times 5, so on. Okay, and that is the integers and doubles. Let's move on to strings. Now to create a string, you can either use single quotes or you can use double quotes. For this example, I'm just going to use single quotes. And a string is basically a string of characters. So this is one character, this is another character. So you can create a string of characters. You can accept letters, you can accept space, you can accept numbers, symbols. But as you can see, these dollar symbols, these ones are special in Dart, which I will demonstrate really shortly. But let's just print it out and see. And there you go, this is a string. So strings have this special functionality which can incorporate other values into the string. Let's see, let's type an actual sentence. Oops. Okay, now we're going to create another variable. Something like this. Now we want to insert this value into the string. One way we can do this is to manually just type 10, right? But what happens if the SpongeBob variable gets updated? Like something like this, something like this. Then we are losing track of what the actual value is. So that's why we can do something with the dollar symbol and the variable name. Now what this does, let's run it and see. You are taking the latest value of SpongeBob and you're inserting it into a string. So it will give you the value in a string format. So yeah, this one will be really useful to insert a data into a sentence. Alright, next we have booleans. B-O-O-L is the the name in Dart, which is a boolean. Booleans only have two values. Booleans can only accept two values, which are true or false. That's it. No other values will be accepted by a boolean. Now booleans are usually used with if-else statements. Let me just demonstrate what an if-else statement is. Right, so you notice that there are two equals now, right, instead of one equal. And the one equal means you're assigning a value to the variable. Two equals means you are comparing the left side to the right side. And if the left side is the same as the right side, then this block of code will be executed. If it's not the same, then this block of code will be executed. Now let's see what happens. So we run it, it prints not nice, because the false is not equal to true. If we change it to true, then be nice. Yeah, so booleans are usually used in if-else statements. And the final data type we have is list. To create a list, just do the square brackets and that's it. You have created a list. Now when we print it out, it's going to be empty, right? This is an empty list. There's nothing in there. So a list can hold multiple values, such as this. Yeah, so now we have 4 values and each value is separated by a comma. Print it out. And there you go. Now here's a question. Can anyone tell me what are the different data types in the list? Like all of these values. What does it contain? Ah, yes, Brandon is right. 𝗙𝗏𝘂𝘁𝗁𝗏 is right too. So we can contain strings, it can contain integers, contain booleans, and also a list inside of a list. Yeah. And let's say, okay, now logically speaking, right, a list of names shouldn't have integers, shouldn't have booleans, shouldn't have other lists in there. List of names usually will be like all string values, right? Now let's learn how to restrict the type of value that is getting accepted in the list. To do that, just do these symbols and then insert the data type. And now this list can only contain strings. If all of these other values, that will be like, hey, you can't do that. That's not a string. So yeah, that's it. That's the 4 basic data types. For maps and sets, I am not going to cover that today, but feel free to check it out in your own free time. And for custom widget classes, we'll cover that later on. So let's move on. For null safety is a feature which you can apply to a variable. And this only works for explicitly typed variables. It allows the value of the variable to be null. If you try that with like a string or something, you cannot assign null value to a string. But if you add this question mark over here, then you can. So for example, this is an example. We have a variable named favorite YouTuber, and the variable type is a nullable string with the question mark over here. And yeah, we can assign a value to it. First, value is 𝗙𝗃𝘂𝘁𝗁, print it out, and let's say maybe 𝗙𝗃𝘂𝘁 did something wrong or something. I don't know, cancel culture in Twitter, whatever. And then now you don't have a favorite YouTuber. So it's fine to assign the value to null. You don't need to have a favorite YouTuber. It's fine to not have a favorite YouTuber by doing this question mark thing here. So this is called a nullable value. And nullable values are usually used in if-else statements as well. For example, in a real scenario of a Flutter app, right? The if is going to be something like, if this value doesn't exist or is null, then you don't show like a widget. If this value exists, then you can show this widget, something like that. Moving on, we have the constant and final variables. Just add a final keyword or a constant keyword in front of the variable, and then these variables, the values of these variables, they cannot be changed after declaration. Yeah, in a real scenario, it's like your birth date, right? Once you have a birth date, you can't change your birth date. So if you try doing so, yeah, Dart will tell you like it's an error. And yeah, just add this final keyword over here. Yeah, these are the different formats. But don't worry about it. Usually, most of the time for the constant, in a real Flutter app, the code, Dart will tell you like when to add constant. And for final variables, you can just use it on variables that you know that are not going to change. That's it. Oh, right. We are done with the first topic. Yay. Okay, moving on to functions and methods. Let's take a look. Now this is a function that when you run, it will provide this output. I'm not going to explain what the actual, like what is a for loop and whatnot, but if you guys want to try it out, there you go. And yeah, so if you run this code, it will produce this output. Now let's take a look at this scenario here. Yeah, basically, the mom now has to make 5 of these for her son. Without functions, the code is going to look something like this. So the mom just copy and paste the same code 5 times, and yeah, it's going to be very long, very messy, untidy, whatever. And now with functions, the mom is smart. She just extracts the logic of the code into a new function called print pyramid shape. And then she can just use this function as many times as she wants. And here she used it 5 times, and this is the output. So a function can be declared either before or after the main class, the main function. And yeah, you can just use it by calling its name and the brackets. And that's it. If you guys want to try it out. Okay, now to actually create a function. For this part, I'm not going to go into like really specific details because later on we're not really going to be creating functions, but I'm just going to let you guys understand what we're looking at. So a function can have 2 types, with return value and without return value. So a print statement doesn't actually give us a value, right? It's just printing it out into a console. So we use this void keyword over here, which indicates that there's no return value. And inside of these brackets, you can have optional parameters. For this one, we don't have parameters. And yeah, basically this example is almost the same as the previous one. It's just printing out stuff. As for this return value function, this one is a little bit complicated. So now it can return a value. Let's say I need to start explaining parameters first. So this is a parameter, as you can see, but a parameter is basically like a variable but without an actual value yet. So the actual value will come from the arguments when you are using the function. So when you're creating the function, this parameter doesn't actually have a value, but we're just telling Dart that it's an integer so that we can do integer stuff with it, like comparing and so on. But the argument is the actual value that will be passed into the parameter. So in this case, the argument is 10, right? So the parameter here, the number variable will be 10, and this will loop for 10 times and return the result. And in this second example, it's 15, so it will loop for 15 times and return the result. So the return result over here is you're returning the value of the result. And since the result is an integer, we do an integer here to indicate that the return type is an integer. So once the function returns an integer, Dart will know that, and hence we can create a variable to store whatever is returned. For example, like this. So we are creating a variable number 1, which is an integer, and it stores whatever value it returns from the function. Yeah, pretty cool. Okay, now methods and properties are something that are inside of a class. And since we've learned about variables and functions, now methods and properties are almost the same thing, it's just that it's inside of a class. Methods are almost the same as functions, properties are the same as variables. So methods and properties in Dart are accessed through the dot notation. Different methods properties exist for different class, and yeah, you can see more about all of these at the documentation over here. Let's take a look at some examples. So we create a string variable, and this is the value, right? Now we are applying this method, and this method is basically a function but is inside of the string class, so that's why we call it a method. And the method is accessed through the dot over here, so the variable dot and then the methods. When we print it out, you can see that it converted into all caps. Now let's try it out. So instead of this dot, instead of this method, let's just remove, type of dot, and then you can see all of these different things appearing, right? These wrench looking thingies are the properties, and these cube looking thingies are the methods. You can see there are a lot of different methods, and each method will return something different. This one returns a string value, this one returns a string, this one returns a string. Yeah, basically, you can see something like integer, so it returns an integer. And yeah, basically different methods have different uses. Now as for properties, properties are the same as variables, so they can store some information about the variable. Like for example, use the property .length, and then it will show you like how many characters this string is. In this case it's 21. Yeah. Now we can look at this API over here. Just going to search up a list class, and let's see all the different methods and properties in the list class. List class, there's a constructors, don't worry about that. Properties, there we go. These are all the properties in the list class. Methods, these are all the methods in the list class. Now let's try it out. Delete everything, create an empty list. Oops. Okay. Now it's empty, right? Yeah, I'm just gonna add some values first. Right, now let's take a look at some of the properties and methods of the list. If I add a dot here, it show you all the different ones. Let's try length. So the length of the list will tell you how many values are in the list. In this case, there are 2 values, so 2. And as for, yeah, there are also first and last. So you print the first element, print the last element of the list. Now for the methods, there's this clear. Let's see. Yeah. So this clear method returns a void. So we can't actually print it out because it returns void. It doesn't actually give us a value. So if you print it out, yeah, it doesn't work. What you can do for this clear method is to just use it outside first, then you print the test again, and let's see what happens. There you go. So the clear method actually removes all of the variables in all of the values in the list and gives us an empty list. So yeah, in a real Flutter app, you can have a button you press and then it will clear the whole list, something like that. Okay, going back. That's it for the first and second topic. Now we are moving into Flutter territory with the widgets and classes and all those stuff. Now we're not going to use a Dart application anymore. So head on over to View, Command Palette, and yeah, search Flutter. And now we are going to create an actual Flutter project. Same thing, select Application, and select folder. Okay, now we just wait, and I'll give you guys 20 seconds. Right. Now all of this code over here is actually generated by Flutter, and this is the demo app, so later on we will run it, but not now. Now we just see like all of the different things over here. So this is a widget. This widget is created by us, and some of these widgets like material app, theme data, all of these are provided in the Flutter library already, but something like my app, these ones are user created widgets. And yeah, there are a lot of widgets like scaffold, app bar, center, column, all of these are widgets. And you click over here, you can see this is the whole widget tree of the app. And this blue Flutter symbol thing is a widget. So my app is a widget, material app is a widget, and all of these. So basically, a Flutter app is a whole widget tree. Okay. Right, so now I'm going to explain a little bit about classes and what is the fundamental concept of a class. So widgets are a type of class, but a class is like a blueprint. For example, we can take this real life example, right? An architect can create a blueprint for a house, right? And the inside of the blueprint, it specifies like the length of the house, maybe it's 80 meters long, 20 meters wide, and the wall color is white or whatever. It has 4 rooms and stuff like that. So once the architect is done building, specifying the blueprint, then it can hand it over to the construction guys, and the construction guys will be the ones actually building the house, right? And they are building the house based on the blueprint. So in a way, classes are like blueprints where you can specify how you want to build the widget, and yeah, then Flutter will actually build the widgets based on the classes that you specify. Let's take a look at this example right here. Now this is the class called doghouse. By the way, the doghouse is, the name of the class is, instead of lower camel case, we follow upper camel case, so the first letter is just capitalized. That's it. Now this is the expected output of the class, the doghouse class. Now you have created a blueprint and you're telling Flutter to actually build it. So this is what happens. To build a widget, you use something like this, just 2 brackets, which I will explain later. And then, ta-da! Now an actual house, a doghouse, is created from the blueprint. And yeah, basically you can build it again and again and again, as many times as you want. So you specify the blueprint once, and then you can tell Flutter to build it as many times as you want. That's it. And thankfully, Flutter already has ready-made blueprints or widget classes for you, such as a lot like scaffold, app bar, text. Everything you see is a widget, like all of the UI elements are widgets. But we can also specify our own widgets later on. But yeah, Flutter already provides you a lot of widgets out of the box. And you can combine these with packages from the Flutter community. So these are like the other Flutter community members, they can create their own widgets and publish it, and you can download the widgets, and yeah, basically they have already created all of the blueprints and you can just start using it. It's so easy, right? Okay, to actually use a widget, this is an example. So different widgets have different parameters and different arguments that you need to pass in. A container widget can actually accept no arguments and something like this. However, if for a text widget, this is an example of the text. Yeah, something like this. This is a text widget. It actually accepts an argument of a string. So just pass the argument into the bracket over here. And for other types of widgets like paddings, they usually have named parameters, which I will get into later. And yeah, so to use the name parameter, you just put the parameter name, colon, and the argument value, comma for the second parameter, and same thing. So different widgets have different parameters. And there are 2 types of widgets in Flutter. So all of these are widgets, right? But they can be categorized into either a stateless widget or stateful widget. So stateless widgets are widgets that you cannot change after it's created. So all of the values must be final, and if you want to actually change the text or whatever, you have to destroy the widget and rebuild it again. But for stateful widgets have their own state. So values can constantly change within the state. For example, a checkbox widget, right? You click on a checkbox, then it will show tick, and then if you click on it again, it will uncheck. Yeah, so later on we'll see the state function, which basically tells Flutter to update the UI whenever a change is made. However, people often argue like, why not just change everything to a stateful widget, right? Since stateful widgets are better or superior, but you must also know that stateful widgets consume more resources. So if you change everything to stateful widgets, then yeah, your performance will suffer. Okay, now let's say we want to create our own widget. We want to create a house widget. We don't want to use the Flutter specified widgets. So yeah, these are the specifications. The width is 30, height 20, wall color white. And this is the widget tree that we want to return, because basically a Flutter app is a whole widget tree, right? So we're creating a small widget tree over here in the house widget. So when we are building the house widget, this whole thing will be built. Now this will be the output in the actual app. As you can see, the column widget is invisible. It's basically just aligning the children. Column widget has 4 children. The 3 containers are the roofs, and the last container is the actual body of the house. So this will be how the code looks like. I know it's pretty overwhelming, but don't worry. As you can see, the widget name is house, and it's a stateless widget. And don't worry, because Flutter, if you're using Visual Studio Code, you can just press ST and you can choose stateless widget, and this will be the default template. And that's it. Okay, now what we are actually looking at over here, we can break it down into 3 different parts. The first is the constructor. The constructor is used for creating instances of a class, such as house, bracket, something like that. And inside of the constructor here, we can specify the widget parameters. In this case, Flutter default creates the key parameter, but the key parameter, most of the time, like 99% of the time, you won't be using the key parameter, so don't worry about that for now. And the second part is the property field. Now since it's a stateless widget, right, you use a constant constructor, and also all of the fields are final. Now the properties are basically like variables that can store value, and it can either have default value or values derived from the constructor. But in this particular example, all of these values are default. And finally, we have the methods as well. So in a widget class, it must have this build method which returns a widget. So we are returning a column is a widget, and then within the column we have a lot of different widgets. So yeah, and these methods also have access to the property values. Let's take a look at this last container here. You can see the width and height, the color, is not actually coded, like the value is not actually coded in. The value is derived from the properties, and the property values can be derived from the parameters, which we will see later on. Yeah, so during the actual construction, we have a list of houses here. We are actually constructing the house. This will be the output. As you can see, all of the houses look the same, right? They have same width, same height, same wall color. But what if we don't want the same thing? What if we want different height or like different wall color of the house, right? That's where parameters come in. Don't worry guys, this is the last part already, so just hang in there, okay? Now there are different types of parameters in a widget. This is the basic no parameters empty constructor. By the way, I've just removed the key parameter just now, so yeah, it looks something like this. And to create house instances, it looks something like this. Is build the name for the constructor method. This build, hold on, yeah. So this build method is actually all of the widgets have to have a build method, and the build method is automatically executed. So whenever you do something like this, then the build method is automatically executed. So as long as you return the correct widget, then the whole widget will be returned. Yeah, so you have to name it build. There's no other way. Okay, so no parameters will have the default values like this. And now we have positional parameters. To specify positional parameters, you do the parameter name, but notice how we have the this dot keyword over here. Now the this dot keyword actually links the parameter name to a property field with the same name. So it has to have the same name as the property field. So when we use the this dot, then when we pass in an argument value, the argument value can go into the property field with the same name. Now positional parameters are required and it's arranged according to the position. Let's take a look. For example, for house height, it has to be in the first position, wall color will be a second position, and it's required. So it has to have two values here. And this will be the height and the color of house 1. House 2 will be 50 and red. Next, we have named parameters. These are the most common in widget classes. For example, all of these, see on press, tooltip, all of these are named parameters, which you can see by hovering over the widget, and all of these are the parameters. Now named parameters are enclosed in the curly braces. So if it's in the curly braces, then it's a named parameter and it's optional, so you don't need to actually provide a value. That's the nature of named parameters. However, since it's optional, then we usually use it with this question mark, right? Since if you don't provide the value, then it'll be null. And for named parameters, you can also use a required keyword to show that it must have an argument value upon creation. So that's very useful because sometimes, let's take a look at this example. Because sometimes if you don't put required for the house height, then if it actually doesn't have a house height, then the container won't return. So the required keyword prevents this, and if you add a required keyword, you don't need the question mark already, and looks something like this. And finally, we have parameters with default value. So the named parameter and have a value over here. And since it has a default value, you don't need to add the question mark anymore. And it cannot be used with the required keyword. So if you don't pass in any value, then it will take the default value. If you actually pass in a value, then it will take this value instead. Something like this. Okay. Now let's take a look at this same scenario but a little bit different. Now we want to make the wall color white by default unless it's specified. So anyone can tell me what's the difference between this and the one before, if you guys still remember? Is it the constructor has changed? Is it the property? Is it the build method? So what changed? Decoration. I mean, technically you're correct, but notice how the constructor has changed and also the property has changed. So now we've added this parameter, right? The wall color, and the wall color has a default value of white, and then the value over here will be passed into the property of wall color, and the property of the wall color will be passed into the actual container color. So we can use it in two different ways. One is without the parameter over here, without an argument. So if there's no argument provided, then it will be the default white, right? So this will be house 1. And if there is an actual argument, then it will override the default and provide the color. And that's it. Now it's time for hands-on Flutter. Yes, finally. Yeah. So I can close these. Do this. Right. Okay, so now before we take a short 5 minutes break, I want you guys to do something, which is to run the Flutter app. Because if you run the Flutter app, it take a few minutes. So first thing, make sure the extension is installed first, right? Then, now there are two ways to run the app. First is to go start debugging over here. And the second way is through the terminal. If you don't have a terminal, you can go terminal, new terminal, and to type flutter run. But before we run this command, first go over to this bottom right side corner over here, click on this, and it will show you all of the different devices. So a Flutter app can run on mobile, can run on desktop, can run on Chrome, right? Oops. Okay. In this particular workshop, I'm not going to run it on an emulator because it's going to lag my PC, like my PC is going to hang and stuff like that. So I'm going to run it on a Windows desktop app. But if you guys don't have a Windows desktop app over here, then you can go run it in Chrome or Edge or whatever other platforms you have. So in this case, I'm just going to select Windows desktop. And then now I'm going to do flutter run and press enter. And select number 1 since it's Windows, and that's it. So now we just wait for it to build and we take a short 5 minutes break. Okay, welcome back guys. And I assume most of you, all of you, I don't know, should have this up and running, something like this, right? If you're using Chrome, then you have a browser. But if you would like to follow along and you have not installed Flutter or anything like that, you can go over to Google and you search, you go to this link. And basically you can do a sample counter, and this will be the same thing. It's an online compiler, but yeah, it's not as good as the Visual Studio Code because a lot of functionalities will not be in here. But that's just one of the alternatives. So yeah, this is an online compiler, and it's the official compiler of Dart and Flutter. So you can run basic code here, but it's not going to be as good as the Visual Studio Code. So now most of you guys have this, right? Something like this. Okay, just going to put this at the side. Right, now let's start. So you see all of these different code, and yeah, basically this whole thing is to build this, the app over here. Now you can interact with it. There's a button over here, you click on it, it will show it's updating, and that's a stateful widget. But for now I haven't explained a stateful widget, right? But it's okay, let's see. First thing we're gonna do is Control A and delete everything. Yes, delete everything. We're gonna start from scratch. Now the first thing is to import the Flutter materials library. Inside of this library we'll have a lot of different widgets and a lot of different functions as well. After that, we just type main, and you can see this option appears, right? Click on this, it will give you the main function, and inside of the main function we'll have this. We are going to run this function called run app, and the function accepts a widget, but we can technically just pass in a container widget or something like that. But now we're going to create our own widget. So after the main function, type st, and we're going to create a stateless widget. Now let's name it something, just any name, my app. And yeah, since we created this my app widget, we can pass it into the run app like this. Okay, so we don't want to return an empty container, right? So just delete this container. We're going to return a material app. Now this material app, in most Flutter apps, it's the root, it's the top level widget. And this material app contains a lot of different things like navigation, like themes, font sizes. You can change everything like default text, font sizes, all stuff like that. So usually in a Flutter app, you will only have one material app, which is the top widget. And now the material app will have something called a home, which is a named parameter. So we type home, and the home accepts an argument of a widget. So we can return a scaffold. Now the scaffold widget is basically like a page. So each page will have a scaffold widget, which is like the layout of a page. If you guys join tomorrow's workshop, then scaffold widgets will be explained more clearly over there. And the scaffold widget will have different name parameters, right? But let's just save it first, save the file, and click in the terminal. And these are the different commands, by the way. You can see if you press H in the terminal, you can see all of these different commands. But we are going to only focus on these two, hot reload and hot restart. If you are using Chrome, you only have hot restart, but it's okay. It's just a little bit slower. So let's press R in the terminal. And now you see a blank screen. That's basically these two right here. So the scaffold will be the white screen, and this debug banner will be something in the material app. So maybe we want to remove this debug banner, right? So anyone else that couldn't copy the Zoom chat? Oh, is that so? For me it works just fine, but I'm not sure. Or I guess you have to manually type it out then. Bummer. But anyways, okay, so to remove this debug banner, let's say you don't want it there, you can always go to Google and search how, because sometimes you don't know how to do stuff, right? So just search Flutter how to remove debug tag and just click on the first link, and there you go. So it's a parameter called debug show check mode banner in the material app, and just set it to false. Inside of the material app, before this home parameter, we just do this. You can set it to false, save it, and reload, and you can see that it's gone now. Yay! Okay, moving on. In the scaffold, we have a lot of different parameters, right? One of them being app bar. So let's pass in an app bar parameter with a widget. Now this widget doesn't actually exist, it's just an abstract class. So if you don't know what widget is an app bar supposed to accept, since it doesn't show over here, again, Google, just Flutter app bar. Yeah, click on this, and basically you're just seeing like an example, right? And there you go. You can see in the app bar, it accepts an app bar widget, of course. So let's pass in the app bar widget and save it. And now it can get a little bit annoying, since this whole thing is one long line, right? Maybe you want to break it down. So to do that, in the ending of the brackets over here, you can add a comma and save it, and you automatically format it like this for you. So now we refresh, and now our app will have this. Yeah, but that's basically an app bar. Inside of the app bar, we can add stuff as well. So it just nested. In the app bar, we have a title. Let's pass in a title, and the title is a widget. So the widget can be anything you want. It can even be another app bar, but why would we want to do that, right? So usually the title will be a text. Now in this text widget, it has a positional parameter as well as all the other named parameters. So if you remember correctly, the positional parameter is required and it's a string. So let's pass in the positional parameter. So the title, we maybe just want like home page. There you go. So this is the app bar with a title. Yeah, there are basically a lot of different other customizations. You guys can check it out in your own free time. But now let's do something with the blank scaffold over here. So the blank scaffold has a body, and yeah, basically if you want stuff to show over here, it's in the body. Let's do that. After app bar, put a body parameter. This body parameter accepts a widget as well, but most of the time you want multiple widgets, right? So we can use a column or row or something like that, basically a layout widget. And layout widgets will be explained more in tomorrow's workshop, but for now, in the column, let's add children, which accepts a list of widgets. So this is a list. Now we can add widgets inside of the list. Let's add just an example. Just add like first widget, comma, second widget. Save it, reload. There you go. These are the two children in the column. Okay, so now maybe you don't want this to be at the edge of the screen, right? We want it to be a little bit over here, and that's where you can wrap the whole thing in a padding widget. If you're familiar with CSS, HTML stuff, then you would know what a padding is. But if you want to wrap something in a padding in Flutter, just click on the column. Since we want to wrap the whole thing in padding, right? Just click on the column. Now here's the magic. You right click, refactor, and you can wrap it with padding. Now this provides you a default value of 8 pixels. So we can change it to like 30 pixels or whatever. Save it, reload, and now the padding widget basically applied an invisible layer of 30 pixels around the column. So everything is pushed 30 pixels away, and that's the beauty of padding. Okay, now for other types of widgets, maybe we want to add an icon widget or an image. To do that, again, if you're not sure, just Google over here icon class. Now then this will be an example. These icons are arranged in a row, but let's just take one icon like this, something like this, and just paste it over here. I'm not sure if you guys can copy and paste, but I'll just put it in the chat for now. Okay. Right now we save it and reload, and you can see the icon appearing here, right? Now you can see all of these squiggly blue lines. These are basically Dart telling you that they prefer the const keyword with the constant constructor. So yeah, most of the time you don't need to worry about what a const is. Just Dart will tell you like when to apply const. So you hover over it, click on quick fix, or you press Ctrl dot. Then you can select add const modifiers everywhere in this file. But this one still appears. Sometimes it's a little bit buggy. Basically it's telling you to add a const in the whole list like this. Yeah. Okay, instead of now instead of this icon, maybe you want a different icon, right? To do that, just delete the audio track part, which is the property, and you can see all the other types of properties of the icons class. All of these are the icons. If you want to see like a visual representation of those icons, head on over to this website. There are all of the different icons that you can apply. For example, let's just take this search off, for example. Icons dot, it should show search off. Yeah, so we just change these, and there you go. If you want to change the color, you can either access one of these default colors provided, or if you want to specify your own color, you can hover over this this box over here, and yeah, just select any color you want, something like this. Okay, moving on from icons, now let's add some image. Again, don't be afraid to Google, guys. Image. There are two ways to use image, either like this or like this, but for now we're just going to use this. Copy and just paste the whole thing in here as a widget. It's showing that the image cannot be a constant value because it's deriving it from the network. So just remove the const. It's okay, guys, just remove it. Yeah, that's it. Now if you refresh, it will show the image over here. This image.network can accept any image link. You guys can try it out, but I'll demonstrate it later on. And yeah, if you want to specify width and height, hover over this and you can see this is a positional parameter, right? And it also accepts named parameters. So since it's a positional parameter, it has to be in front. So the width and height over here has to be behind the positional parameter. Let's add a comma, width maybe like 300, height 200. Okay, save it. And there you go. Okay, now we've explored a few different widgets, right? Let's say we want to add some interactivity to our app. Now let's just add a button. Like there are a few types of buttons, but in this example, it's going to use an elevator button. Elevator button has two required parameters, which are the onPressed and the child. For the child, it accepts a widget, so we just put a text widget like press me or something. And for the onPressed, it requires a function. So if you remember how to create a function, is something like this, right? This is the main function. But in this onPressed, you don't need to specify the name and the return type. You just do this and it will work. And this is called an anonymous function, which doesn't have a name. So anonymous functions are basically like one-time use functions. Like this particular button will only perform this, like nowhere else, something like that. Now inside of here we can add blocks of code, for example print. Okay. Save it, reload. Now let's see what happens when I press the button. You can see in the terminal over here, it's showing the print statement when I press the button. So we can print out variable values and stuff like that. But okay, now to add some interactivity to our app, right? First, we need to the best practice in Dart is to separate it. Like if you see a long widget tree like this, it's best to separate it into smaller widgets so it's easily manageable. To do that, let's say we want to start like everything in the white space over here, we want to separate it into our own widget. To do that, just go over to where the body starts, which is this whole thing over here. The whole thing starting from the padding, right? This is everything in here. So you click on the padding, right click, refactor, and then we're going to extract it into its own widget. Now we can just give it any name it wants, as long as it follows the rules. In this case, we're going to put scaffold body. And there you go. Then Flutter automatically just creates the widget for you and just assigns it over here. So that's very, very convenient. If you're using the .pad.dev compiler, then yeah, you can't do that. Okay. So now everything in the body is in this widget, so it's more manageable. Okay, let's add some interactivity. For example, we want to show status true. Now here's what I want to do. I click on this button and I want this status from true, change it to false, and if I click it again, status from false, change it to true, basically like toggling the status, right? To do that, first we need to add a property. Since now there's no property, add a property of a boolean called status, and the default value is false. Now you may have noticed something like, why is it showing the red thing, right? Hover over it, it says can't define a constant constructor for a class with non-final fields. If you remember, stateless widgets are everything has to be final, all the fields have to be final. So we have to convert it to a stateful widget if we want to toggle this from false become true, then true become false again. So you have to convert it to a stateful widget. To do that, again, just click on stateless widget, right click refactor, and just click this button. That's it. Flutter does all the work for you, so don't worry about it. Now a stateful widget looks a little bit different. It has the stateful class over here, and it has its own state class. So this is where all the updating happens. Now we're just going to focus on the state class, but basically the layout is still the same. There's the constructor here, the method, then the property here, and the build method. So now we want to put this status into whatever this variable value is. To do that, just add the $ status shown earlier. Let's see. Okay, now it's reflecting correctly, right? But the button obviously is not working yet. It doesn't toggle the status. To do that, delete this print first. Inside of the onPressed function, we are going to toggle the status, this status variable. So we are going to use an if-else statement. If the status is currently true, then we want to change it to false. If the status is currently false, we want to change it to true. Okay, save it, reload. Now let's see. Oh, it still doesn't change. Why is that? That's where you can use the print statement to see what's actually happening. You're going to print the status value afterwards and see if it's actually updating. Yeah, so if you see in the terminal over here, it actually is toggling, but it's still showing false. That's because in stateful widgets, it has to have the setState function. If you remembered, I briefly mentioned about the setState function. It's basically to tell Flutter that this has been changed, so you want to refresh the UI to show the changes. To do that, before the if statement, just type setState and click on this, and basically just move the whole code into the setState like this. Now there you go, it should work. Now it's toggling. Yay! Right. In Dart, there's this thing called a conditional operator. So for if-else statements that are simple, like this one line kind of changes, you can use conditional operator like this. So this is the syntax of a conditional operator. Yeah. Oops. Okay, there you go. So this conditional operator basically simplifies, it does the same thing as an if-else. So you have a condition over here, add the question mark, and then it's evaluating. If it's true, then this part of the code will execute. If it's false, then you can pass in this. Now let's convert the if-else to a conditional operator by doing this. So now we have the status, right? Just do a status. Now if the condition is true, we will want to do this. Else this. So basically we have converted this if-else statement into one line. Yeah, so just delete this if-else and replace it with this. Reload and it should still work. Now for conditions like equals true, if it's a boolean, we don't actually need to do the equals true. Just do this and it will mean the same thing. So it's further simplified. Status, if it's true, then this will execute. If it's false, then this. Okay. Right, so now this conditional operator, this whole thing, it can also be applied in parameters and arguments of the widget. For example, let's say we don't want to show this owl. Let's say we want to show two different images based on the status. For example, if it's false right now, we want to show this image. If it's true, we want to show another image. So we can do that by manipulating the source inside here and using the conditional operator. So I've provided you guys with two images. These are the links. If it's false, you want this image to show. If it's true, you want this image to show. And you are supposed to add the conditional operator inside of, like, over here. Just separate it out, and then inside of this you can manipulate what's returned. Right, I'm going to give you guys 3 minutes to try to figure out how to do this. So if it's true, you want to show this image. You want to show this image, and if it's false, you want to show this image by using this conditional operator like this. Right, go ahead guys, and I'm going to set a timer for 3 minutes. Okay, so if you haven't figured it out yet, let me just demonstrate it real quick. So to change it based on the condition, you can do status. Let's evaluate it. If it's true, you want to return this image, and then if it's false, you want to return this. Okay, let's save it and see what happens. There you go. Boom. Okay, that's it. Now, you can apply this knowledge that you have learned, like how to create classes, how to manipulate the widget tree, and yeah, you can also go discover all of the navigation, for example, creating a new page, and then applying themes such as changing the color of this app bar, changing how this button looks, all of this stuff. And yeah, I hope I've provided you enough knowledge to start experimenting on your own. And in tomorrow's workshop, we'll be doing something more useful, like not just this. So yeah, stay tuned for tomorrow's workshop. And that's it from me. Thank you guys for listening. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Adrian, for that session. I'm pretty sure a lot of us learned a lot, and you know, with the sprinkling of memes along the way, it made it so much easier for us to digest and so much more fun for us to learn with you. So before we end today's session, there's a few things we want to do first before we let you guys go. And first of which is a photo taking session. So yeah, would really appreciate if all of you guys could, you know, turn on your cameras, let us see all your beautiful and handsome faces, and we can immortalize this moment on our social medias as well as on the GDSC page. So yeah, don't be shy, guys.